I think my aesthetic today that I'm going for, and I think I try to go for this often, is like Paulie from Rocky, like just with the plain crew neck, the the stocking hat. I try to
You
go
actually
for
look a little
Paulie.
bit.
I think a
I
lot.
mean,
Yeah.
you definitely are giving off some Polly vibes, but a little bit of Mickey. If you were to just kind of turn your voice a little gravelly, a little bit,
Ah,
yeah. Especially just
I'm
kind of
not gonna do that. There, Rock.
turn it off to the side. He wants to bury you. Yeah,
It wants to
there,
bury you, Rock.
yeah, there you go.
There we go. I think that's the aesthetic I'm going for today. Maybe I'll stick with it. If I cut in and out, it's because we are on I am on the south side, back on bad quality internet, no lighting, the whole 9 yards. For one
So
final Tomlin press conference
I was
of
gonna
the
say,
season. You're gonna straighten your camera up. I'm gonna straighten my hat back up as well.
yeah, it was a
I
little
am
too
Corey
high.
Christen. I am Corey Christen. He is Chris Halicke. Of course, you're locked into the South Side Beat, as we are Monday through Friday, 3 Eastern, here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. For one final time, Chris, Mike Tomlin gives his words, his thoughts, and I'll tell
His
you what, from the
eulogy on the
33
season.
minutes, yeah, eulogy of the season, yeah. And I'll tell you what, this was the most candid, the most maybe honest, the most, I guess, practical Mike Tomlin was in
Yeah.
the 18 plus weeks regular season that we have spoken to him. And a lot was said about obviously his future, the quarterback situation, and the big one, the offensive coordinator situation. So a lot to get into about what Mike Tomlin had to say today.
Yeah, I obviously was not there. I watched from afar, but I watched it live, and yeah, I thought even from the very beginning, whenever he was kind of joking about like anybody got any contract questions and stuff like that, but it was a little bit more of a candid for sure, but I would even say a bit contrite. Kind of the way that
Yep.
he spoke. You can see, and I'm gonna tie in what he said, in an interview with Bob Labriola on Steelers.com when he was asked about the year after year after year of not succeeding in the playoffs, or a couple of years not even making the playoffs, and he said, I don't focus on the broad picture like that. Especially don't ask my players to do that because it's a different team every single year. And the one thing he said was, I don't ask them to tote around my luggage. And
Yep.
you saw today what's in that luggage a little bit. He definitely was, like I said, candid and contrite about that weight that he's carrying around. So if Steelers fans are carrying it around, I think you got a little bit of a glimpse of just how much he's also carrying it around, how much he wants to succeed, how tired he is of 9-8 and wild card round exits.
Mm-hmm.
I think we saw a little bit of that today, and I was a little. It was refreshing to see that a little bit from Tomlin, and some of the other changes that will be coming. I think are reflective of him kind of being tired of it.
Yep. And not only that, but also, yeah, he could be tired of underperforming, which they have over the last
Mm-hmm.
however long it's been by this point.
Yep, for sure.
But also, he could just be tired of doing the same thing and getting the same results, which is what he has done. I think, and I'm not going to suggest here that Mike Tomlin had his come to Jesus moment between Monday and today. That's not what happened. I
Mm-hmm.
think Mike Tomlin was able to reassess and was able to take a look at some things and say, hey, like, we need to change how we're doing this. And to me, like, I know Najee Harris said it after the game Monday about how some things need to change internally, not talking about coaching or personnel changes, but talking about the way things are done.
Mm-hmm.
And if that kind of comment is the thing or a thing that Mike Tomlin took to heart, and maybe that, he talked about holding exit interviews, maybe that's been mentioned throughout these exit interviews. If that's something that Mike Tomlin has taken to heart, then that's going to be reflecting on these changes that are going to be made over this offseason. That comes with player and personnel decisions.
Yeah, we definitely saw again some of the things, and that's why the episode is titled the way it is. Of we know change is coming based off of what Tomlin said, and that's why whenever we spoke yesterday, I wanted to see what Tomlin said because regardless of how often fans think that a lot of what he says is just a lot of speaking but not actually saying anything, you definitely you can't just automatically assume that's what's going to happen, because every now and then he does knock one out of the park in terms of actually giving a lot of information on how this organization is going to run moving forward. And the end of season press conference is one of those times where you usually get at least a good barometer of what's to come over the next weeks and months. The offensive coordinator hire was a big thing that he immediately came out. Now, he said that Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan would not be considered at this juncture. That's what he said. But
Correct.
there seemed to be no indication that, but we might come back around and kind of put them in the list of candidates. It sounded like he wants new, fresh ideas at that position in his staff. And we've been talking about that. I know I've been talking about that. That's what this organization needs. They need new, fresh ideas at the offensive coordinator position. And I really, really liked that. To me, was a tone setter, not only with what he said in his preamble, but what he said about that position and the way he answered questions about it. That to me was a huge step of being like, okay, it might not be the overwhelming, like top to bottom changes that some fans want, but there will be some change coming. And that's a big one.
And that would be real change also.
Yeah.
That would be not only a change in the short term in the actual decision and in of itself, but it's also a change from his ways. It's a change from going back and finding his buddies, so to speak, and finding guys that he trusts that are close to the vest, or even promoting from within. That's a change in and of itself. It was a change in and of itself when he fired Matt Canada midseason. Now, again, the argument always will go back to, well, Matt Canada never should have been able to set foot in this building in the year 2023. That should have never happened. Nobody's second guessing that. But the way that Mike Tomlin phrased it, again, not at this juncture, Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, those two, in my opinion, are last resorts. If there's nobody out there that Mike Tomlin finds, if there's nobody out there that Mike Tomlin hires, they'll just stick to that. And that's obviously the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, if one of those two guys is the offensive coordinator for next season, something went terribly, terribly wrong in the interview process here. I can already think of at least 3 better options just in terms of experience and actual skins on the wall when it comes to being an offensive coordinator over either Eddie Faulkner or Mike Sullivan. Clint Kubiak's one, Shane Waldron's one, Alex Van Pelt's one, even though I'm not the biggest Alex Van Pelt fan, the more homework I've been doing on him, but still would be a better option than either Faulkner or Sullivan, in my opinion. But and Swan says, name those options. Like, listen, like I can think and everybody can speculate, but we won't know until they actually start interviewing people. And as of right now, no insider anywhere has any kind of gauge on who they're going to be interviewing. There's obviously a process that they've got to go through. That's got to be approved by the league office. Tomlin talked about that. But they have to go through this process. And I can talk about like my hopefuls and stuff like that. There are some people that, like, I think Clint Kubiak would be a good option. I think Shane Waldron would be an option. Those are, as of right now, probably my 2 favorites as of right now, like me personally, but just because they're my personal favorites doesn't mean they're the right favorites, or even that either one of them is going to even interview. Like Kubiak might be completely content being like, no, I'm fine being where I am in San Francisco. So there are a lot of options to go through, but yeah, I would agree that if it's either Eddie Faulkner or Mike Sullivan as offensive coordinator in 24, something terribly went wrong during this interview process.
Absolutely. Now, all right, let's address a couple questions here. Lori says, Tomlin didn't exactly give a ringing endorsement of the defensive coaching staff. Might we see some changes there? No, he did not. And he did not really have much to say about it, which means could see some change there too. Can't rule that out at this stage.
Yeah. Now, granted, I'm trying to remember back to last year because I obviously covered last year's end of season press conference, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went when he was asked about the coaching staff, coaches who were going to be under contract in 24. Obviously, the big name that everybody wanted an answer on was Matt Canada, and he kind of went about the same way. Didn't say either way. Like, okay, he's definitely going to be our OC, or he's not going to be our OC in 23. That wasn't confirmed until later. I was one of the first ones to get that information and to report that information that Matt Canada was definitely staying on. But that had to be confirmed later on, and it had to be confirmed before the team actually confirmed it. So that wasn't just because he says, and he's being tight-lipped about it, doesn't mean, oh yeah, for sure, Terrell Austin's gone. But he also, to go the other way, he also could have said Terrell Austin's our DC in 24, no matter what. He could have said that, but he didn't. So the fact that he was tight-lipped about it is going to just kind of leave that one. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see about that one.
Yeah. All right. Let's go into the comments here, because there's some really good questions and really good thoughts. Steeler 808 asks, how soon do they bring an OC in? It has to be sooner than later, but it can't be no later than April. Just from the standpoint of the NFL draft and where the league calendar is, and the NFL Combine obviously coming up in February and March. Like, that kind of thing has to be addressed before the Combine. Mm-hmm. They have to go into that scouting week
Senior
knowing
Bowl even
who the offensive coordinator is. Senior Bowl and at the beginning of February, which I am currently making plans to go to.
Have fun, dude. Mobile's fun, for sure.
I've heard. So
did it for the first time last year. It was fun.
Yeah. So it's got to happen soon. Now, these kind of things are weird because, like, for example, the Falcons are announcing their head coach interviews, and teams will announce that have head coaching vacancies open, who they're interviewing. They have to do that. They don't have to do that for coordinators.
Yeah,
they don't have to do that for coordinators.
It's usually announced. It's usually announced because, like, I remember, like, obviously we were tracking Brian Flores last year. That was a big one because we knew going in, like, to the offseason that there's a really good chance he's going to interview for better positions elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened. And so he interviewed for several jobs, and every time he interviewed for something, it was not only announced by the teams, it was then posted on a big list on NFL.com that they had of all of the different interviews that were going on. So you could literally go through and see all the jobs that Brian Flores interviewed for before he, ultimately accepted the defensive coordinator job in Minnesota.
Right. All right. A few more here. I'm still going through the chat again. I think we have a lot of topics, but this is a big one. Brian says clearly he has already made his mind about who he wants a quarterback. Mason should just leave. Very disappointed on Tomlin's part. Now, if you go on DKPittsburghSports.com, don't do it now because we're in the middle of a show, but do it when we're done. Mike Tomlin gave a really strong reaffirmation to Kenny Pickett, to me, in my opinion. It was a really strong reaffirmation to Kenny Pickett. However, he did say they want to bring Mason Rudolph back to compete with the guy. Mm-hmm. So you're going into this offseason. Right now, Kenny Pickett, you can't say solidified as QB1 because Mason Rudolph is still a free agent. And that could very well blend back into itself by the time the summer and OTAs and all of that come. So Mason Rudolph holds the keys here. In my opinion, Mason Rudolph is driving this. And Mason Rudolph, whether he resigns in Pittsburgh or not, like, I think that was Mike Tomlin's partial plea to saying, hey, Mason, here's what we can offer you. He did that publicly just now. And I think another part of it is saying, I still believe, Kenny Pickett's a Mike Tomlin guy. Mm-hmm. Mike Tomlin still believes in Kenny Pickett, and he's going to profess that as he did today. Yeah. This is fascinating stuff. Now, that's one of the other big topics to me, and I think it's something that is only jump-started today and is going to be really teetered based on Mason Rudolph's decision in March.
Yeah, and somebody kind of brought it up when it came to here actually recently. Lori says it didn't sound like they plan on looking at a free agent quarterback, at least to start. I think that their primary focus when it comes to the quarterback situation is ideally the way they stand now is they would love to be able to re-sign Mason Rudolph and have the top two quarterbacks on their depth chart next year in whatever order it shakes out to be Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. I think that's what they want. Amos actually comes in with a really quick, $1.99 contribution. Yeah. Really appreciate it. And this is actually an interesting question because it does kind of allude to one thing Tomlin said about free agency. I know this would be a trade, but Amos asks chances they try for Justin Fields. That would obviously be a trade, and I'm not ruling it out because if Mason Rudolph does sign elsewhere, they will have to bring somebody else in just because one of their three quarterbacks on the roster in 23 is not going to be there anymore. So they would then have to fill that role. And when Tomlin talked about addressing, now he was specifically talking about free agency, but this could also apply in trades, was going back to guys that they liked through the draft whenever they learned about players through the draft process. If you know anything about Mike Tomlin, you're going to see it when you go cover the Senior Bowl. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl. He's going to be on the field, and he's going to get his face right in the thick of things and get right up there with the players. And throughout the combine and pro day process, Mike Tomlin does a lot of homework. He meets with a lot of guys, and he loves to learn about those guys because even if they don't get them in this draft, they could end up getting them later on via free agency or trade. And I think, like most people kind of know, that Mike Tomlin had something for Justin Fields through the draft process. And so that could be something that plays out later on. Not saying it's going to, but when it comes to quarterback, if Mason Rudolph does not come back, actually, before I even get to that, like where they stand right now at quarterback is where they stand right now. That could obviously change depending on who the offensive coordinator is, because Tomlin also did talk about how the OC has an impact on the quarterback and how imperative that is, because as Tomlin said, it is a quarterback-driven league. It just is.
Yes, and he's fully aware of that. And by the way, before we're going to keep talking about this quarterback situation, if you still had, not you, Chris, if you in general had any inkling that Tomlin wanted to leave Pittsburgh or hang it up or retire or take time away from football,
we all knew.
Just watch today.
Yeah.
Just watch today's press conference. This man loves what he does. He's a football junkie. He's a football lifer. He was never going to leave. That outside speculation, that outside reporting, just watch it. Just watch his body language, watch his motions, listen to his voice, listen to his inflection. And that's a man that loves what he does. And that's a man that is reaffirming a commitment to be here in Pittsburgh. And it's very evident that Art Rooney II feels the exact same way. And they're going to work towards a contract extension. That's also what I gathered in another bigger picture perspective on Mike Tomlin. For
sure. It sounded like it was just a formality that's waiting to happen, that Tomlin's getting an extension. Not so some people that were hoping that he would either step away or possibly even be fired. Again, him not only staying on for the final year of his contract, but most likely will end up getting an extension at some point prior to the 24 season. That really comes as no shock. I mean, this is the Steelers' way of doing things. Again, we can talk about the criticisms that are very valid when it comes to Tomlin's performance, especially over the past decade. But it's just, it is what it is. You can complain about it. You can be upset about it. It is what it is, man. Tomlin's not going anywhere.
Also, how about this comment from Mike Tomlin?
I love that. I love that part.
Matt says he carries a heavy heart that Pouncey didn't get a ring. Mike Tomlin said, and I'll paraphrase it, one of his biggest regrets in his coaching career is not getting Marquise Pouncey a ring. Like, for him to call that guy out as a guy that was a winner but didn't get that kind of recognition, I thought that was powerful stuff.
Yeah, and anybody who remembers, Pouncey was on that team that lost to Green Bay in the Super Bowl in the 2010 season. That one even kind of hit me in the feels a little bit, because I can go back and remember like a time, well before I ever became a journalist or anything like that, and was just a big football fan. And whenever you hear a coach like Mike Tomlin, who is usually very, very singularly focused, and right now is in the process of decompressing from the 23 season, and then will soon be turning the page to 24. For him to pull that name out of the past and to say that one of my biggest regrets is to not have won a ring for Pouncey, like that one, to me, again, you want to talk about toting around luggage. I think, again, that was another glimpse of, hey, if you're frustrated with 9-8 after, every season, or first round exits every season, I don't think you're the only one frustrated about it. You're probably not nearly as frustrated about it as Mike is himself.
I love what Darren says here too. Heavy heart feels guilt for more than Pounce. Probably scared he can't get TJ or Cam a ring. Like, I don't want to say scared, but think of it this way. TJ Watt never won a playoff game. TJ Watt's never won a playoff game. TJ Watt, future Hall of Famer, first ballot. He hasn't won a playoff game yet.
No, 2017 was his rookie year, so
Yeah, the last playoff win came in the 2016 postseason.
Yep.
TJ freaking Watt has never won a playoff game. He's in that like Calvin Johnson, Joe Thomas territory right now. Hall of Famers never won a playoff game. Like, you don't think Mike Tomlin thinks about that?
Yeah.
Cam Hayward's never won a ring. One of the most deserving humans to ever win to ever, be in contention or whatever you want to call it. One of the greatest humans on the face of the earth, people-wise, community-wise, everything, has never sniffed a championship at this level. That's what we're talking about here. That's what this is about. Swan brings up Presley Harvin was given some notice too. He sure was. So was DeMarvin Leal, for that matter. DeMarvin Leal, Presley Harvin. Yeah, we're put on notice at the end of that press conference.
I will say, though, at least to Marvin Leal, he kind of left it a little bit open-ended with the team. He's got some work to do, both guys are under contract for next season. Like, they're just still under the rookie deals. But it sounded like both guys were definitely put on notice, but it sounded a little bit more optimistic, just a little bit more optimistic about Leal than it did for Presley Harvin, because the only thing he said was he was not consistent enough, and that's pretty much it. And when Tomlin is that direct about something like that, it was the same way whenever he took punt return duties away from Gunnar Olszewski last season. Mm-hmm. I remember that one. I asked that question in the press conference, and he was just pretty much like, yeah, I don't have a lot of trust there.
Yeah, I remember that. I was sitting next to you in that. We both kind of looked at each other like,
okay, well, there's your answer. Mm-hmm. And who was returning punts? Who was returning punts the next week? It wasn't Gunnar Olszewski.
It was Steven Sims, was it not?
Yeah, it was Sims.
Yeah. Swan says he has a heavy heart for Ramon Foster. You could air your grievances out in about 40 minutes on the Ramon Foster show right here at DK Pittsburgh Sports.
I'm really curious to see what Ramon's view was of that comment that Tomlin made about Pouncey. I'm sure that there are a lot of guys who played with Pouncey. Like, I would think that even like somebody like Ben Roethlisberger would watch that and kind of get that little, just kind of like to get the shakes and everything like that, like they're about to start crying and everything like that. Get the lip quiver going.
Jeez,
just because
sure you're okay.
I'm trying to remember, like, obviously when they lost to the Browns in 2020, when they
the shot of Ben and the shot of Ben and Pouncey, right?
Because Ben knew that was Pouncey's last game. Like he knew that was Pouncey's last game, and he was just like, man, Ben wore that. And so when you see players wear it for each other, that's one thing. When you see a coach wear it for a player like that, that hits people a little bit different. Lori said, "Give that man an Oscar."
Thank you. Oscar. Nice job, Chris. Nice job, Chris. Swan asked, "Do you really think they'll go outside for more coaching?" Yeah, they have to. At this stage, they have to. How much they get or how many people they hire, TBD. They have to go outside for the offensive coordinator, and I think Tomlin knows that by this stage.
Yeah.
Let me go through a couple more here. Mark says, Kenny deserves a shot to prove himself with a competent coordinator with Faulkner's running game. Mark, I agree with you. And in fact, I've been consistent in agreeing with you on this. Mm-hmm. I still, even after what I just saw from Mason Rudolph, I still want to see what Kenny Pickett looks like with competent coaching and competent coordination. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair take. I think that's a fair assessment to say. Well, I'll also acknowledge that Mason Rudolph, in this really broken, defunct system for 3 games, really held it down and played pretty well, all things considered, in Buffalo.
Yep. I do think, and listen, like when some people are kind of concerned about, okay, well, what if they make the wrong hire when it comes to playing to Kenny's strengths? Like, listen, a good offensive coordinator will tailor his playbook to the quarterback's strengths, no matter what he's strong at. Obviously, every coordinator has different strengths in and of themselves, whether it comes to the passing game, to the running game, their play calling, any combination of those things, plus a whole lot of other things that are part of evaluating a coordinator's body of work. But a good coordinator can be able to tailor his playbook and tailor what he does as an overall offense and tailor his scheme to a quarterback's strengths. I think the big question here, and I think this is a legitimate question, is what are Kenny Pickett's true strengths? And I think that's a question that has to be asked and appropriately asked, because you can think, okay, well, he's really good in the fourth quarter. He's okay. try to talk about actual quarterback things. I can point out one major flaw that's actual quarterback play, and that's obviously pocket presence. Give me strengths, actual strengths of Kenny Pickett as a quarterback. Now you could talk about that he has the capability of throwing receivers open. He has the capability, there's different things that you Swan, you're mean,
Okay,
man.
you finally saw it. You finally said it. Yeah, you finally saw that. Also, I was laughing at Ben here.
Yeah,
Leave Mason Cole out of this, man. Leave Mason Cole out of this. Ben says Mason Cole has never won a playoff game. Leave Mason Cole out of this conversation right here.
So, and I think when B, not B full, sorry, I clicked on
You had to put
comments are
B-Phil's
coming
age on the screen like that.
No, it's like Chris G says, seems like KP's strengths are all intangible. That is a valid concern about Kenny Pickett. Now, I'm not saying that just give up on the guy no matter what. There is still a part of me that thinks that Kenny Pickett can be. Do I think right now that he can become like a tier 1 quarterback? I don't see it. Does he have the tangible traits that under the right coordinator and in the right system that can become a quarterback good enough to take a team to the Super Bowl as long as he's got the good supporting cast to go along with it? I think so. But again, he's got to clean up certain weaknesses that will absolutely keep him from becoming a good quarterback. And that is the part of me that's curious of, like, what can he do when he doesn't have Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator, or when he doesn't have Matt Canada's playbook being called and game planned by Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan. I am still curious about that, but I do think that it would behoove the Steelers to really, really also look for some external help when it comes to quarterback to go along with what Mike Tomlin said. Yes, he's confident in Kenny, but there needs to be competition as well. There does need to be competition for Kenny Pickett.
Did you hear that giant heater that just kicked on?
I do hear it.
Somebody just kicked the heat on here in the here in the indoor. Somebody just kicked that big. So if you can't hear me, then it's not my fault. I did okay for 26 minutes here.
The sound quality to go down a little bit.
That might be my sign to get out of here. We'll do that. DK and Rowan will take over in about 33 minutes here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Chris and I will be back, of course, on a Football Friday. Still Football Friday. I think it'd be okay to talk a little playoffs, like a little bit of AFC, NFC playoffs. See what we can think the rest of the, the divisional round to me is the most exciting week in football. Just because of the matchups. Look at how good all these matchups are. I think it'd be a cool thing to talk about that tomorrow. So maybe we'll do that. We'll obviously dive more into Tomlin, into Pickett, the offensive coordinator, the offseason. Long way to go. So we'll get into all that.
Mike does ask here, what type of time frame should we expect to see a Mason signing? First off, free agency doesn't start until middle of March. I think it's March 13th. If it's not that exact date, if it's not that day exactly, it's around that time. It's middle of March. So I would expect Mason Rudolph to test free agency. If he wants to re-sign with the Steelers prior to free agency opening, I think that can happen at just about any time. It would have to, but if he is going to test free agency, the earliest you could possibly see him sign is that day or a couple days after that, because I'm sure he's going to go out and test and see what his value is elsewhere. And if it's something the Steelers are not comfortable with paying, then it's bye-bye Mason. So we've got a while before we would see Mason Rudolph possibly sign with the Steelers, unless he's just absolutely content with coming back no matter what, not testing his value elsewhere.
And by the way, this coming from Post-Gazette report, Rudy says Steelers plan to extend his contract, Mike Tomlin's contract. So there you have it. A lot more to be going into with this offseason, a lot more discussion about Mike Tomlin and how the Steelers could improve into 2024. But for now, we're stepping away. DK and Ramon in about 30 minutes, right where you found this. He's Chris Halicke. I'm Corey Crisan. I'm not going to get eaten by the heater over there. We will talk to you on a Football Friday. Cheers, everybody. Have a good day.